Well, hey, welcome to the Game Changer Purpose Podcast. So glad that you are here with us. As always, we get an opportunity to grow in our purpose. And whether it's in life, leadership, our hope is through those that we get to interview, sharing personal story, but also practical principles. We want to see you grow in who God's called you to be. And so today I'm excited. I got an incredible guest, Dan Owolabi. I'm going to read a little bit of his bio, and then we're going to jump into this interview. Dan, he's the CEO of Branches, a ministry dedicated to supporting high-impact entrepreneurs, executives, and business owners around the world. That's probably just like you. He's got over 20 years of experience teaching leadership. Dan is a sought-after international keynote speaker, teaching pastor, and a member of the Global Leadership Summit teaching faculty. To date, Dan has worked with leaders in over 25 countries and 5 continents. I love that. He's helping them clarify their identity and leverage their influence to serve others. Dan's latest book, Authentic Leadership, quickly became an Amazon #1 new release. He holds a graduate degree from Ashland University centering on American leadership and is completing a doctoral in global leadership from Fuller Theological Seminary. Dan is a teaching pastor at Grace Church in Wooster, Ohio, where he lives with his wife and 2 daughters. Dan Owolabi, welcome to the podcast. So glad that you're here with us, brother.
Hey, it's good to be here, Josh. Man, I'm excited about today.
Come on, man. Well, I'm excited for people to hear your story. Obviously, incredible bio, but just getting to know you, getting to understand God's story through your life, the leadership role you're playing. I'd love for you to just, talk a little bit about your upbringing, because I know that's influenced who you are greatly today, just to help people understand kind of where you've come and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start kind of with the big element in my life. My mom and dad both were Nigerian immigrants, and both of them were deaf. Both of them couldn't hear. And so growing up, I couldn't tell really what it was about in my life that was weird. Was it that my parents were deaf? Was it that they were Nigerian immigrants? Was it that we were the only Black family in our town? There was just a lot, going on. Looking back now, man, I really appreciate that type of upbringing. My parents were just ambitious people that did a lot with their lives.
Yeah.
But at the time, I was really embarrassed by it, and really ashamed. It took me a long time to really kind of grow into my sense of authenticity. But when I did, man, it made a huge difference in the way that I see the world, the way that I relate with other people.
I love how you start there, and I'd love to even hear more about your parents, because I know in your book you talk about kind of their story, some of the things they did. What brought them over, to the States?
Yeah, so one of the things that really compelled them was education. I've always been a big fan of education. My mom and dad were a big fan of education. It's funny, the people who come to the United States oftentimes tend to be dreamers, visionary, and to leave everything back in your home country, wherever you're coming from, and come, and start over. You have to be a certain kind of person, and both of them were that type of person. So they wanted a better future, and they're willing to just risk everything for it. That's in my DNA too, and so that's one of the reasons why they came. For me though, if I was thinking about my purpose and thinking about who I am and where it started, I've always lived at the intersection of leadership and faith. It's always been a really important, compelling factor for me. And so, when I was younger, I wanted to be seen as a leader, but I was just so different from everyone else in a lot of different ways. It took me a long time to sort of feel my sense of authenticity, like I mentioned earlier. Then when I was a high school history teacher, I really wanted to help my students become better leaders. When I was a basketball player in college, I really wanted to be seen as a leader. It wasn't until I started being a pastor, I was a pastor for about 10 years after I left teaching, that I really started to understand how to help people become great leaders in the church, how to help them be genuinely influential.
Yeah.
Not for their own name, for their own kingdom, their own clan, but for God's kingdom, how to advance God's kingdom using their influence to make people's lives better. So that's really where things really started to gain momentum in my life.
Come on, man. Well, number one, I think that's where we got some things in common is you play college basketball. And so the sports thing definitely drew me to you as I'm reading your story in your book. But I love how you talk about kind of your upbringing and how different you were. And I think that's one of the things, as I look at what you're doing today, as I read your story, man, I'm so compelled by how God is using you. But obviously, you didn't get there by accident. There's a story that God has been telling through your life. And it's a journey, I would say, that's the less traveled journey by many. And as I think about just purpose, as I think about my own life, and even some of the challenges in purpose and really in authenticity, is you're looking at leaders that you kind of admire, you're looking at aspects you want to be like, but the road you're on seems very different than where they are. In sports, I say it this way. I say, everybody wants to be Steph Curry, but nobody wants to go to Davidson. And if every player coming out of high school, you want to go to the big school, and Steph did too. But it was his journey to Davidson and kind of taking the road less traveled that I think ultimately developed him as a player, which allowed him to become the person he is today. And so you talk about, I would just say this, first of all, for when we're talking about purpose and leadership, don't follow the crowd. Don't follow the people in front of you. Find and follow the path that God has for you, which, again, I'll just be the first to say that can be really hard. And that's where I think authenticity is really hard, because we're going down a path that nobody else is going down. And so it just makes you feel like, I got to be doing something wrong. Like there's something wrong with this picture. The other thing you said, which I didn't really fully know this, but talk about your journey. You were a teacher first, and you transitioned from a teacher to a pastor, and now you're primarily working with leaders. When did you know faith and leadership, the intersection between those two, was kind of your bullseye? And how long were you a teacher, and then how long was that journey before you really felt like you landed in your sweet spot?
Man, that's a fantastic question. So, Josh, I want to go back to something you said a little bit earlier and just disagree with you. You said that we both played college basketball. We played college basketball, man, but you were way better than I was. I saw you played basketball. I was on the team. There's a difference between the two. But no, I think what you're saying is 100% true. And there is this degree of loneliness, disillusionment. Man, am I doing the right thing? There's a lot of things that got us to teach you in those moments. And he's done it all through the Bible. Like with Joseph is a great example of that. Just this long period between the promise and the fulfillment of the promise. Like that sense of figuring yourself out is something that Moses went through it. Everybody kind of has to go through it. But for me, I think figuring out kind of where that moment came for me was trying to hold two things in tension. So when I was growing up, my mom and dad were just very active in the church. I always understood what faith was, and really sort of owned it for myself in college. But I loved communicating. I loved teaching. And so for a long time, I thought, well, I'm going to be a teacher. That's the way, and I'm going to show my students the love of Christ. But then teaching felt too constrained. So I was like, I need something different. So I became a pastor. The opportunity opened itself up. I'm teaching the gospel. But at the same time, that also felt very constraining. And what I realized over time is I have a deep entrepreneurial streak. And that's only so useful in the teaching realm, and it's only so useful in certain pastoral realms. And so then what I learned over time is that, what I really love to do is I really love to build new things. I love to convene people together. I love to work with high capacity leaders. That's what makes me come alive. And so the search for what my skill set was and seeing where that intersected with God's will, my skill, God's will, like that's where I really started to figure out that, okay, this is where I need to live. And anything I do, it's got to be sort of at that intersection of God's will, my skill.
Wow. I love that language. God's will, my skill, developing my skill while constantly trying to figure out how do I align those skills with the will of God for my life.
Exactly right.
I mean, that's the bullseye. That's the true definition of purpose.
That's it. And honestly, I mean, you have to be ruthless about sort of releasing every other sort of constraint to run fast towards, sin also, but other people's expectations, to run fast toward that bullseye. That's a great word. I mean, to go back to Steph Curry, I mean, it's saying no to a lot of things so you can be the world's best three-point shooter. Like that is just what you are.
Man, how long was that process for you between teaching, pastoring, wrestling with those questions? How long was the process? Then also, What was the story or conversation with those around you as you're navigating? Was it
Mm.
people encouraged you, even stepping out of the pastoral world to enter into? Was it a lot of encouragement? Did they not understand it? What are you doing? What was that like for you?
It was a lot of the latter. It was what are you doing? That doesn't make a lot of sense. Oh,
Yep.
do you have insurance? Things
Yes.
like things like that. How are you going to feed your family? Um, and there's certain degree of believing in
Yeah.
yourself, betting on yourself, but also a certain degree in confidence and saying like, God, I believe you are as real as the shirt on my back, and
Yep.
so I'm going to take this step of faith. And like, if you don't come through,
Mm.
not only will I be embarrassed, not only will I be a laughing stock and I'll have to go crawling back to whoever,
Yep.
but man, it's going to hurt. Like I'm going to lose some things. I could lose my house. And so there's all these things that sort of, come together that put pressure on you to say, man, this isn't a good step. But it's really faith that kind of pushes you over the edge and say, if God's real, I believe he's calling me. I got to make this move. So it took a long time. And honestly, I wish I could tell you it was a one-time thing. Like
Yeah.
it was over the course of my life, and probably the same for you. I've probably had six of those, like where I'm like, man, I've accomplished some things. Oh gosh, you're asking me to step out again and leave all that behind. Oh, okay, great. I have to do it again and again and again. And that's really what's helped get me to a place. So
So good. When you first started to kind of, I would say, shift from the pastoral to more of the broader entrepreneurial leadership, did you kind of stop the pastoral, go all in, or was there kind of a gradual transition where you started to work more with entrepreneurs, do leadership? What was that kind of transition like for you?
that's a great question, Josh. There was some overlap. So I was a
Yeah.
pastor, like I'd said, for about 10 years, and I started a leadership company while I was pastoring. And
Yeah.
I could feel, pastoring was going well. So a lot of the volunteers were taking over some of the things that I'd been working on. So I had some free time. So I started pursuing some things that I knew were in the direction that God was taking me. Started that company. It went really well.
Yep.
And so it kind of gave me a launching point. But there was this identity shift that didn't have to happen in me. Like I always saw
Yeah.
myself as a pastor, regardless of what occupation I'm in. I'm a pastoral type guy.
Yep.
But other people, when you're always a pastor, to leave the ministry,
Yep.
usually it's because you did something wrong. Like you slept with someone you shouldn't have, you stole
Right.
some money, whatever. But to leave for just because you think God's calling you to is very rare. And so
Yep.
having to have those conversations with people as I made that leap, that was probably one of the hardest things I've done.
Yep. Oh, I can't imagine. And like you said, the voices of what people are thinking and saying, but the knowing that you're following God's will along with the skills that he's given you that you're developing. So you had the kind of consulting thing going on. So when did you start branches? Was that the consulting thing that you already had going on? Because now, I mean, number one, I love your model. You've got for profit and nonprofit, both
Mhm.
focused on entrepreneurial leaders.
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
nonprofits focused on leaders around the world, all these
Mhm.
different countries and continents. And then you've got the for profit. Talk about that model and how you kind of discovered how you started that model.
Yeah, we almost stumbled into that model. There was a certain degree of focus around the initial mission. Look, we are here to help entrepreneurs around the world who are
Yep.
building companies that are designed to change communities, and we
Yep.
believe business is ministry. So, we need to help them. But once we got some momentum there, we started to realize what we were teaching these entrepreneurs was working, and also there was a demand in the United States for people to really understand how to integrate their faith and their leadership in a business context.
Yep.
And so we started seeing opportunities to supplement some of the donor dollars that we were getting for our leadership nonprofit work, and started saying, well, we started a consulting company. And shoot, I'm entrepreneurial. So if you tell me, hey, let's start something new, I'm like, yeah,
Let's
let's do
go.
it.
Yeah.
So that was a fun thing for us to do.
Again, I absolutely love the model because you're doing the same thing, just
Yeah.
in slightly different contexts. You wrote
Yeah.
the book, Authentic Leadership. I've got my copy right here. And
Hey, there it is.
this was really when I first got connected to you. It was a little over about a year ago.
Yeah.
I actually
Yeah.
was sick for a season. And
Mm.
I forget how I got connected to the book, but I had it, started reading through it. Man, just
Mm.
started underlining and highlighting and really resonated with what you were writing. What was behind this book, Authentic Leadership? How did you maybe how is this a part of who you are as a leader, what you were teaching leaders? Like, what was the genesis behind this book?
Yeah. Yeah, let me start by saying, Josh, man, I'm just thoroughly impressed by the research you've done before this podcast. I'm like, holy cow, man, like you know a lot. This is good. Asking all the right questions. I think so the idea behind authentic leadership really came from both a need in the market. Like I could see people really wrestling with insecurity. As a pastor, I work with hundreds of business leaders. You're sitting down one-on-one with them, they're talking about something in their life over coffee, and all of a sudden this insecurity starts pouring out. And they'll say things to a pastor that they would have never said to their spouse, like men and women. And so I'm hearing these things and seeing these patterns and realizing, what they're putting on a mask. A lot of them are posturing and pretending. But then also, a good book comes from your own experience. Like you can speak to it with this depth of certainty. Like what I'm saying is true and helpful. And so my own journey, is really trying to figure out who am I in a world full of people who aren't, I'm 6'4" and I'm Black. Most people I interact with are not 6'4" and Black. I have deaf parents. Most people don't have deaf parents. They're mostly, so the fact that every room I walk into, I'm different really created this deep sense of insecurity in me for a very long time. And so it took me a long time to sort of own who I was and really try to figure out what value I bring to every room I walk into.
That's good.
And being armed with that sort of solution, being able to articulate it in a way that people I think could really understand, and then turning towards an audience that I know really needed that solution. That's where that book really started to come together.
Yep. I love that. And, I've said before, I think our book, especially some of our first books, are really a reflection of our purpose and our story and who we are. And every message we share should be tied to the purpose that we're living. And so you talk about your story and how that connects with this. How long had you been leading? How long was Branches going before you wrote this book? And then talk about the role this book has played within the work that you're doing with Branches.
That's a phenomenal question. So here's the funny thing. I started Branches with a partner in late 2018. So we really just kind of got things rolling. The name was pretty much all we had, and we applied for the nonprofit status. I felt God like calling me as clearly as I've ever heard him to write authentic leadership in December of 2018. So I'm starting this international nonprofit and I'm writing a book for the very first time. And both of them are like uncertain. They might not work. It'd be smart to do one or the other. Like don't do both at the same time, Yeah. But very much hearing him tell me to do it. And if I didn't do it, I was confident I'd be in willful disobedience of God. Like if I didn't do it, I knew that I'd be sort of out of his will and, actively disobeying. So yeah, went ahead and wrote the book. And honestly, watching them both grow at the same time, the growth of Branches, I think, has been compounded by the success of the book. And the success of the book has been aided by the legitimacy of Branches. It's been fun to watch both of them intertwine with each other.
Yeah, no, I've watched again, since I've been following you, just how this book has played such a powerful role. And I've seen people, I would say, who are hungry for this message. And so you talk about the timing of a book like this, talking about authentic leadership in a world where it seems like more than ever through media and I mean, we're trying to put on a certain facade, a face, because we think it will produce certain results. But this book really talks about the power and influence we gain when we're authentic to who we are. Just talking a little bit about the book, you open up and you talk about just kind of the gap between who we are and what we're trying to present. Talk about that gap and how all of us struggle with that gap in our lives.
Yeah. So the best way to describe the authenticity gap, or the insecurity gap is a better way to phrase it. The best way to describe the insecurity gap is to talk about the feeling that you get whenever you present yourself to the world and you get applause. You can do anything in the world and people are like, man, that was great. Like, I love your cookies, or I love your speaking ability, or I love the fact that you're articulate, you write really well, you're a great manager, whatever gives you applause. There's this moment that you start to realize that the applause feels really good. And the worst leaders are the ones that start to hang their whole identity on whatever it takes to get that applause.
Yep.
And what happens is then you start putting on this mask. You have to be a certain person. I am the person that makes great cookies. I am the person that's a great leader. I am the person that's a great mom. When that becomes your identity, then you start to separate yourself between who you really are and who people think you are. So
Yep.
you can't have bad days. You can't have sad days. You can't have days when you're off. You can't have days when you're not an amazing leader, whatever, whatever. I got a promotion at work. Now I always have to dress a certain way, act a certain way, whatever. What happens over time is there's this massive gap between who you really are and who people think you are, right? The gap continues to grow. You invest more in the perception and less in the real and the real, sort of person that you are.
Yep.
In the gap between the two things is where you start to develop insecurity and real fear and real worry. Like you're always afraid of being found out. A lot of people will talk about this in the phrasing imposter syndrome, right? You feel like every room you walk into, it's you're not being your authentic self.
Yep.
That's because you haven't developed your authentic self. You're not the sort of person who feels confident walking in and just being you because you've invested so much in this facade, right?
Yep. That's so good. And so how do you help people move beyond living in that gap, feeling the insecurities? Because I know for me, I know we've all felt them. We've been there. Like you said, we get the applause and it's like, man, that feels great.
Right.
Whatever I did to do that, I'm going to keep leaning into that. And you start to
Right.
push down those other aspects of who you are because those aren't received as well. Even as far as maybe you feel called to something else, but that doesn't get the same applause. And so you start kind of living in that insecurity. Fear starts to grow. How do we move past that and then start to really live out more authentically who we are?
Yeah. That's a fantastic question. I think the answer to that is really developing the courage to follow Christ, regardless of the applause. I mean, you can earn some accolades for a certain avenue or a certain sort of side of yourself, which is totally fine. Like there's nothing wrong with that if it's taken in the right way.
Yeah.
But the truth is, God might take you in a different direction. He might call you to develop a different side of your personality, whatever. You've got to be willing and have the courage to sort of move against the grain and lean into that. And here's the key.
Yep.
If you position yourself to always be a service of other people, regardless of what room you walk into, look, I am here to take my best self, my skill. I'm here to take that and use that to serve you. Regardless of what you think about me, regardless of whether you give me applause or not, I'm here to help you become the best version of yourself by being the best version of myself. Like that sort of interplay is really what starts to give you that sense of confidence. I got nothing to lose. I got nothing to hide. I'm not trying to prove anything to you. I'm just trying to be the best version of myself as I serve you.
Yeah.
And so if you keep walking that path, then it becomes easier and easier to sort of forego the applause or get no applause or even get some ridicule because you're like, look, I'm not here for your opinion. Honestly, you could hate me, you could love me, you could whatever. I'm here to help you.
I feel like the word that comes to my mind, the words, it's really inside out leadership. In leadership, a lot of times we are focused on external, the applause and how we look and what we're doing. But this book in Authentic Leadership really says, man, leadership starts on the inside.
It does.
It's becoming the most authentic version of who you are, which then you kind of towards the end talk about. That's how you gain the most influence in people's lives. You want to lead, you want to influence, you want to bring change. You can't do that being somebody else. And it will take you so far. So you talk about influence versus like power. Talk about what real influence means, looks like as we're our most authentic self.
Yeah, so I'll talk about power first. I mean, power is typically positional. Power, authority, there's different ways to kind of frame it, but authority or power oftentimes is positional. So you're given a position, you're given a title, and because you have that, you have the ability to force people to do your will, against their will. So you can force them to do your will against their will. And that kind of force, whether you're signing their paychecks, whether you're their parent, whether you're their boss, whatever, that kind of force oftentimes give you the sense that, oh, I do have influence. It's not true. If you weren't signing their paycheck, if you weren't their parent, if you weren't the police officer, whatever, people wouldn't listen to you.
Yeah.
But real influence, that comes when you're getting people to do your will, which isn't always bad. You're the leader, right? So getting people to do your will.
Yeah.
That goes along with their will. They really want to do it. They want to be there. They want to be with you. They see the vision. They catch the vision. You're going in a particular direction and they want to follow you in that direction, right? Yeah. And the only way to do that really comes from, and this is a phrase that I've seen used before, which I think is really helpful. There's two different dichotomies of leadership, and you mentioned a little bit earlier. There's front stage leadership and there's backstage leadership.
Yep.
Front stage leadership is who you are in front of everybody else. Backstage leadership is kind of who you are when you're by yourself. It's you developing your own sense of inner confidence. And the more you develop that sort of backstage leadership, thinking about your values, thinking about your vision, thinking about who God made you to be and how you can be the best version of yourself, the more you develop that, when you finally step out to the front stage, the more genuine, authentic influence you have because people are following somebody who's always real as opposed to somebody who's always right.
Yep. So good. And I think about, as you're saying that too, when you've experienced your own authenticity and you grow in that confidence, it actually compels you to want to help others experience their own authenticity. And, the difference between transactional leaders versus transformational leaders, those that are being led with power, very transactional. This is what I need from you. This is how it's going to help me. This is how it's going to help the company. Versus transformational leaders say, hey, if I help you become the best version of yourself, it's going to not only help you, it's going to help us as we're partnering and working together in this mission. And so I would just say this, and maybe you're somebody, you're trying to become the best version of who you are. You're trying to become the most authentic version. It starts with you. It starts with us as leaders. But then maybe you're in an environment that feels very transactional, where you don't have leaders trying to help you become the best version of who you are. You have to surround yourself with people who want you to be the most authentic version of who you are. And again, Dan, that's what I love about your book. Again, I would encourage people, check it out, authentic leadership, but also community. How would you encourage people to make sure they're connected to a community? Because I think that's what you're doing with Branches, is you're creating community for these leaders that you're investing in. What's the key to being a part of a community? How would you encourage people to engage in a community like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think a lot of it has to do with being curious and then being courageous. So the curious part.
Yep.
Starting to read books, listening to podcasts like this, just really sort of exposing yourself to the different people out there and really trying to sort of gauge, man, I really like this person because the way they write or the way they talk or the way they think or whatever, that really resonates with me. That feels authentic to who I am and who God made me to be. So you increase your awareness by being curious. But then you become courageous by actually following those people. Like you actually go to the conferences they speak at, or you show up in the communities that they're part of, or you try to find the people who are all sort of heading in that direction. And you're like, the more I can become sort of in that stream, and the more I can surround myself with people who are all thinking that same way. And what you'll find more often than not is it takes a lot of courage to say no to the current relationships you're in, to say yes to the future relationships that God's calling you to be in. And you hit it on the head. It's very, very hard to be authentic when you're in a transactional environment. I mean, people are gossiping and, just hypocritical. I mean, it's obviously you want to be an influencer in some of those environments, but man, if you feel like you're being influenced a lot, you got to find some people, you got to find your tribe.
So good. I mean, I think about our relationship, our growing relationship. I mean, after reading your book and seeing some of the things that you're a part of, I just reached out. And I forget, I don't know, I think maybe it was on social media first. And you were kind enough to respond, and we exchanged emails. We did a Zoom call. And here we are months later now, a part of this podcast. We're going to have you here May 9th for our May 8th for our first leadership conference right here in Omaha, Nebraska. Cannot wait. But I just think I was encouraged by a mentor a couple of years ago. He said, Josh, don't wait for your circle to be filled with people that you want it to be filled with. Be proactive. You can build your circle. You can go find people. And so exactly what you're saying, man, you're somebody that I saw hearing your story that I said, wow, I've got a lot to learn from him. I feel like there's some things that, are similar to our stories. I've got to be connected to him. And you were kind enough to respond. I think about purpose, and I think authenticity is just another way of describing purpose. I love what you said, skill, God's will, bringing those two things together. As we get ready to wrap up, number one, I could ask questions all day because I love learning from you, and you've already shared so much wisdom. But as we get ready to wrap up, how would you encourage leaders to continue to pursue their most authentic, purpose-filled self as they are on this journey of becoming the person that God's designed them to be?
That's a good closing question. So I think I would say that the best way to find your purpose is to immerse yourself in a problem that brings energy. I think oftentimes, if you're not overwhelmed with purpose, it's because you're running from problems. You're trying to create a safe, sort of comfortable environment. But
Wow.
if God puts this problem on your heart that, man, just burns, and it can be a social problem like water wells, or it could be a local problem like your school sucks. It could be whatever, but you really want to fix that problem.
Wow.
You start to push yourself to a place where you're using all your skill to align with God's will to fix this problem. And honestly, it's the problem itself that's really going to kind of give you the reason to become a better version of yourself. Find people who are moving that direction. Read books that you would have never read. All that stuff, because you're really focused on that, solving that problem and serving those people.
Come on, man. So good. I love that you close with that, because I think so often in purpose and leadership, we're trying to get better. We're trying to look at other people. We're trying to become the right person. But ultimately, it comes down to it not being about us. It's about something bigger. It's about a problem that God designed us to be a part of the solution in some way. And so we're always best when we're looking out beyond ourselves and understanding how we get to be a part of the solution to the challenges that our world faces. So I love that you close with that. Again, I would just say this, so excited to have you here. May 8th, our leadership conference. And as people are getting ready for the conference, or maybe people just want to stay connected to you, what's the best way for them to stay connected?
Yeah, so I'm really active on LinkedIn. That's one area that you can find me. I'm pretty active on social media, so Instagram or Facebook would be two places that you can find me. Or you can check out Branches. Branches has a consulting company. It also has a nonprofit. We work with entrepreneurs around the world. Go to branchesworldwide.org. That's a great way to get connected to our whole community of people around the world who are thinking about the same thing: how to build companies that change communities. And so it's a fun thing. If you're looking for a community, we'd love to have you.
Come on, man. How to build companies that change communities. That's why this is my brother right here. We are in this together, same heart, same spirit. And again, I just want to encourage you, check him out, Dan Owolabi. His book, Authentic Leadership. I promise you, it will not disappoint. It will help you. It will help your team. We're bringing him in as a speaker. Maybe you as an organization, your conference, you need to bring him in. Can't recommend this brother enough. And as always, as you're listening, I know this. There are nuggets, there's stories that challenge you, hopefully encourage you. I know for me personally, there's things that were shared that really encourage and challenge me. We got to keep developing our skills, but we also have to make sure that our skills are aligning with God's will for our life. We're praying, we're asking God. That's where we're getting the conviction to be a part of solving the problems that we're called to solve. That's what purpose is really about. So wherever you are, praying that you take the next step, keep leading and living on purpose for a purpose, because God wants to use you wherever you are. Make sure you check out our other episodes. Can't wait for you to be a part and continue to live out everything God's designed you to live out. Love you guys.